Hello everyone and welcome to PC Retro Tech. So in this week's video I want to talk about this program that I wrote back in 2005 called PixelTex. So it's a procedural texture generator, which is something that you would use to generate textures on the fly in a game. So the way it works is you right click the mouse and select from various options here. So this one here just gives you a flat background, so it's very basic, and you can change the color to whatever you want it to be. So you've got basically an RGB selector here, and then you can combine it with other effects. So this one here is a plasma effect, which looks like this, and again you can select colors or you can select the offset of your plasma until you're happy with it, and then you can add different effects together. So probably a flat and a plasma is not a very interesting thing to add, but if I add something like a cloud in here instead, then you can see that I immediately get something very interesting. So the way the clouds work is they use something called Perlin noise generator. And this starts off at level 1 just by giving a set of pixels that are somehow related to their neighbors, and then just blurring those up. And then at each level it just adds more complexity and depth. So it's a kind of fractal, if you like. And why is it called clouds? Well, if I go back to blue and white as colors, then it starts to look a little bit like clouds. But if I then rotate this, zoom this out, then it immediately pops and looks exactly like a set of clouds. So let's just add that into our image with our plasma here. Let's make our plasma red instead of blue, just for contrast with the clouds. And now when we add, we get something more impressive looking. So I'll just adjust the colors here so it's not quite so bright in the background. And then I can rotate and zoom that image. This probably won't work particularly well because you have to get the multiplying factor just right, and the image has to repeat in order for it to be good. But maybe I can do it like this, and of course I can also do a rotation, and then I can add additional things on top of that at a different level. So let's have a bright blue point, and let's really, well, the brightness is actually set up fairly well there, but I can change the attenuation factor a little bit, and then add that to my image and see whether this looks good. So maybe I won't add that because that's not looking very interesting, but what I can do is multiply, and interestingly enough that doesn't do what I want it to do, so let's try it the other way around. So I think actually I'm better off, when I use multiply, I'm better off actually just sticking with white. There we go, and now we have, it was just selecting the blue out of the original image, which is not what we wanted. So yeah, so now you can get something like this, which doesn't look too bad, and then do another rotate zoom, and you can keep building up your image to get all sorts of interesting effects. So you can play with this for hours and generate all sorts of images with this. I've gone and done a few of these here, so that you can see the sorts of effects that you can get with this. Some of them are really quite interesting and mysterious, and depending on your skill with art and working with this, you can get all sorts of interesting things. So this was motivated by a demoscene tool called the Werkzeug. So Werkzeug is just the German word for tool, and so some demoscene coders used that to generate the textures for their demos. So I'm going to show you that tool. That's a little bit more sophisticated than this, well actually a lot more sophisticated than this. It even has animation, but I just thought it would be interesting to show the version that I wrote after seeing that and being kind of interested in writing my own and what I came up with. Now this is not complete. I obviously had big plans for this. There's a distort thing which does nothing at all, and a stars thing which does nothing at all. And also it turns out that the clouds only work on a sufficiently old machine. So even though this uses OpenGL, this will not run on anything more recent than about a Pentium 3 from what I've experienced. And even some of those it probably won't work on. I don't know why. I mean, just being an OpenGL thing, it shouldn't depend on the hardware. But if you run this on, say, a Windows 10 machine, the program will run, but the clouds will just be a flat background. And it's not a lot of fun to play around with without the clouds. They're kind of really integral to getting very, very interesting textures. So this is currently running on a Pentium 3 with Windows 98. It says it's getting around 400 frames a second, which is pretty fast. And this was basically the idea. You wanted to have the textures using very, very simple algorithms, just some sines and cosines and some very basic math, and then have the textures themselves draw extremely fast using very basic OpenGL primitives. So this was the idea behind the whole thing. It was basically just speed. And then you can take those procedural texture elements, the actual code itself, and put those into a program for making a demo. So let me show you the Werkzeug. Before I do that, I have a little demo that I wrote back in the day to show you as well. It's not very sophisticated, but why waste it? I found it on the same memory stick that this program was on, so let me show you that running. So this is my very basic demo effect called tunnel wire. It's a wireframe tunnel, although at this point it's just a set of points in space. In a moment it will switch over to using wireframe. And it's a very basic OpenGL effect. Most of the hard work here is being done by the OpenGL renderer. Certainly the perspective computation, the lighting, and texture mapping, which you'll see in a moment, is all being done by the OpenGL engine. And this was actually my first attempt at writing a demo effect. It isn't very sophisticated by any stretch of the imagination, and it's certainly not pushing the hardware very far at all. So interestingly enough, in the time I wrote this, there were, I think, just shaders coming onto the market and graphics cards with those, but I didn't have a graphics card with shaders. So this is an early version of OpenGL that wasn't really very sophisticated compared to modern OpenGL, but it worked okay for basic demo effects like this. So I was working through a book called the Red Book, well, that's its nickname. It's a very famous OpenGL book back in the day. And I also worked through some online graphics tutorials called Nihi's graphics tutorials. And this is what I came up with, and as I say, it was my first attempt at writing a demo effect. So this is the Werkzeug, and it's the program that inspired me to write PixelTex. Once I saw this, I thought I have to write something like this. This is just so much fun. So it's very similar. Basically, there's a menu that comes up when you press the A key, and there are a whole lot of options here. For example, flat background, rectangles, a glow, which is a little bit like the point option that I had, random pixels like a star field, clouds, you can have text, you can have an arbitrary JPEG image, blur options, there's add, which is similar to the add option that I had, and there's also a rot zoom, which is similar to the rotate zoom that I had, and there's this fantastic distort option, and I really have to show you that. So if we take a glow here, which is like a point in PixelTex, and clouds like this, and then apply the distort option, you get this magnificent effect. So what it does is it applies kind of a bump map, I suppose, using the clouds as the data for the height, and applies that to the glow, and you can see it really looks fantastic. It looks so realistic. It looks like light reflecting off an actual surface. And I was intrigued back in the day how to do this, so much so that I wasn't able to work it out. I realized there must be some equations for describing the effect of light on an object. I know a little bit more about that now, but back at that time I went to actually ask a mathematician how this was done. And unfortunately I never actually implemented this in PixelTex myself. It would have been a lot of fun to have this going. The other feature, which I can't show you working here because it doesn't seem to actually work on this PC, is that you can add an animation channel, and this allows you to animate some aspect of your picture. So you can pick, for example, in the height thing here, you've got an amount. You could click the A key here, which is animation, and click on to animate that, and then amplify the amount of animation that you want, and it should, in theory, start animating the thing. But unfortunately, for some reason, the animation is not working in this particular version. I think it's because the machine itself is just too fast. Admittedly, I do have to switch it on for it to do anything, but even so, it definitely doesn't work. Not able to get it to animate, which is really a shame, because you can animate everything from a distortion to a plasma to the position of something, and you can do some really sophisticated things once you get animation working. This tool actually has a lot of other options as well. There are mesh things, cylinders, spheres, tori, cubes. There are also materials and shaders, and you can do things with models. There are the ability to import models from 3D modeling programs and so on. So you could really produce everything required to make a complete demo, and in fact people did make demos with this, incredibly impressive ones actually. And of course the main key thing with this is that all of the code needed to generate each of these individual effects was in some library that they were using, and were very short, very fast routines, highly optimized, so that you could do very small demos. So it's really a fantastic tool, and certainly inspired me for quite a long time to play around with demo effects, and it's still one of the things to this day that I consider to be one of the big inspirations that I had over the years to write software and play with old computers, I guess. Anyway, that's all there is for today. I don't want to go too much in depth with this because this will be a very long video if I did. But thanks very much for watching. If you want to try any of this stuff out, there'll be links in the description below. And if you like this style of content, then don't forget to give a like on the video and subscribe if you haven't already done so. And we'll see you in a later video. Bye!